Picture this. A government bans social media apps overnight. Within days, an entire nation erupts. Buildings burn. A prime minister flees by helicopter. Sound familiar? This isn't just another protest story. This is the Nepal Gen Z uprising of 2025. And what happened next will shock you. But here's the real question everyone's asking. Was this a genuine youth revolution or something far more sinister? The patterns emerging across South Asia are too similar to ignore. Bangladesh fell, Sri Lanka crumbled, now Nepal. And some are whispering that India might be next. I'm about to reveal the hidden forces behind these so-called spontaneous uprisings, and by the end of this investigation, you'll understand why what happened in Nepal should terrify every democratic nation. Let's start with September 4th, 2025. Nepal's government issued a shocking directive. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, WhatsApp, 26 major platforms banned overnight. The official reason? These companies refused to register with Nepal's government within 7 days. But here's where it gets interesting. While American platforms faced the axe, Chinese apps like TikTok remained untouched. This wasn't about compliance. This was about control. And someone was taking notes. The spark that ignited everything came from an unexpected source. For weeks, Nepali youth had been using social media to expose something explosive: the lavish lifestyles of politicians' children. Hashtags like Nepo Baby Nepal and Politicians Nepo Kids went viral, showing imported luxury cars, designer clothes, and foreign holidays, all funded by public money while ordinary Nepalis struggled with unemployment and poverty. These weren't just social media posts, they were digital receipts of corruption on a massive scale. Videos contrasted political families living like royalty with young Nepalis forced to leave their country for menial jobs abroad. 2,000 people emigrate daily from Nepal, searching for opportunities their own government couldn't provide. When the social media ban hit, it felt like silencing their only voice against corruption. But this wasn't just about losing Instagram access. Small businesses relied on these platforms for survival. Tourism operators connected with international clients through WhatsApp. Content creators earned their livelihoods online. Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli miscalculated catastrophically. He dismissed the economic impact, reportedly saying he didn't care if a few people lost their jobs. This arrogance would cost him everything. September 8th arrived like a thunderclap. An organization called Hami Nepal, led by 36-year-old Sudan Gurung, organized what they called a peaceful demonstration. Using platforms that weren't banned and encrypted apps, they spread the word. Students were told to bring books, water bottles, and college supplies. This was meant to be a peaceful, symbolic protest. By 9 a.m., thousands had gathered in Kathmandu, Pokhara, and Chitwan. School and college students marched in uniforms, carrying placards reading, "Shut down corruption, not social media." The rally remained controlled until 10:30 a.m. Then everything changed. Two versions of what happened next exist, but the outcome was undeniable. Police opened fire on unarmed protesters. 19 people died that day, including a 12-year-old child. Over 400 were injured, many with gunshot wounds to the head and chest. Clear violations of humanitarian law. The government claimed infiltrators had turned the protest violent, but mobile footage told a different story. Videos showed peaceful demonstrators suddenly facing bullets and tear gas. The brutality shocked even Nepal's battle-hardened population. But here's where the story takes a sinister turn. Within hours, the protests transformed from a social media demonstration into something much larger. The slogan changed from "Restore our apps" to "Oli must go." Houses of politicians burned. Parliament was set ablaze. The Prime Minister and his cabinet fled by helicopter. By evening, the Home Minister had resigned. By midnight, the social media ban was lifted, but it was too late. The genie was out of the bottle. September 9th brought more chaos. Protesters targeted the homes of all major political leaders, not just Oli's party, but opposition leaders too. The houses of former Prime Ministers Prachanda and Deuba were burned. This wasn't partisan politics. This was generational warfare against the entire political establishment. The army chief, General Ashok Raj Sigdal, issued an ultimatum that sent chills down every spine. Security forces were prepared to take control if the unrest continued, just like in Bangladesh. By Tuesday evening, Prime Minister Oli announced his resignation. His office claimed he stepped down to pave the way for a constitutional solution. But everyone knew the truth. He had no choice. Now here's where this story becomes truly disturbing. If you study recent history, a pattern emerges that's impossible to ignore. The same sequence of events keeps repeating across South Asia with eerie precision. First, a democratic government makes a controversial decision that affects young people. Student protests begin, often sparked by social media organizing. The protests turn violent quickly. International media portrays the government as authoritarian. The military intervenes or threatens intervention. The government falls within days. This exact sequence played out in Bangladesh in 2024. Sheikh Hasina's government fell after student protests that began over quota reforms but quickly became anti-government riots. The military ultimately forced her resignation and evacuation. Sri Lanka followed a similar pattern in 2022, though economic collapse provided the initial trigger. Mass protests, government buildings burned, president fled the country. And now, Nepal, with social media bans as the spark. The question haunting intelligence analysts worldwide, is this organic youth rebellion or something more orchestrated? Let me introduce you to a concept that makes governments nervous: the deep state playbook. Released CIA documents from 1983 detail something called psychological operations in guerrilla warfare. Essentially, a manual for manufacturing political upheaval. The playbook is simple but effective. Identify a government that doesn't serve American interests. Create or amplify a trigger event that angers the population. Support opposition groups through funding and media coverage. Encourage protests that escalate into violence. Use the chaos to justify military intervention or regime change. Sound familiar? Consider Chile in 1973. Salvador Allende became Chile's first democratically elected socialist president, planning to nationalize the country's copper resources. Resources controlled by American companies Anaconda and Kennecott. The CIA spent an estimated $10 million supporting opposition parties and funding newspapers to run anti-Allende propaganda. They orchestrated economic pressure, trade shutdowns, and truck driver strikes. When Chile faced food shortages and inflation, they blamed Allende's government. The military coup that followed brought Augusto Pinochet to power, a dictator who served American interests for 17 years while thousands of Chileans disappeared or were killed. The parallels with recent South Asian events are striking. Governments that lean toward China or pursue independent foreign policies suddenly face massive youth uprisings. The protests follow similar patterns: social media organization, rapid escalation to violence, military pressure, government collapse. Bangladesh's Sheikh Hasina had strengthened ties with China through Belt and Road Initiative projects. Her government fell to student protests. Sri Lanka's Rajapaksa government had borrowed heavily from China for infrastructure projects. Economic protests brought them down. Nepal's Oli government maintained close relationships with Beijing. Now he's resigned after Gen Z protests. The geopolitical implications are staggering. Each fallen government had one thing in common: they pursued policies independent of American strategic interests in the region. But here's what makes the Nepal situation particularly dangerous. After news of Oli's resignation spread, social media lit up with messages targeting other countries. If Nepal's youth can take to the streets, why not India? Became a trending sentiment. The message was clear: India, you're next. This isn't coincidence. This is psychological warfare designed to destabilize the entire South Asian region. The goal isn't to help these countries' youth achieve democracy. It's to prevent any regional power from challenging American hegemony. Look at the results. Has Bangladesh become more democratic since Sheikh Hasina's fall? Anti-Hindu riots swept the country. Economic uncertainty increased. Democratic institutions weakened. Did Sri Lanka's situation improve after the government collapsed? The country remains in economic crisis. Political instability continues. Living standards haven't recovered. Will Nepal benefit from this upheaval? With no clear leadership and the military threatening intervention, stability seems unlikely. The harsh truth is that foreign-sponsored regime change never benefits the people it claims to help. It serves only the interests of those orchestrating it. Young people across South Asia are being manipulated into destroying their own democratic institutions. They believe they're fighting for freedom, but they're actually serving as foot soldiers in someone else's geopolitical chess game. The psychological manipulation is sophisticated. Social media algorithms amplify anger and frustration. Viral content makes revolution seem romantic and necessary. International media coverage legitimizes the protests while demonizing the governments. But when the smoke clears and the cameras leave, who benefits? Not the students who risked their lives, not the families who lost loved ones, not the countries left in chaos. The winners are those who wanted these governments removed in the first place. Nepal's youth genuinely suffered under corruption and unemployment. Their anger was real. Their desire for change was legitimate. But their movement was hijacked by forces that don't care about their actual welfare. The social media ban that triggered everything wasn't the real problem. It was just the match thrown onto a pile of kindling that had been carefully prepared over months or years. The real tragedy is that genuine reform becomes impossible when it's mixed with foreign manipulation. Any positive changes get lost in the chaos and violence that follows. So what happens next in Nepal? The country faces several dangerous possibilities. Military rule could replace democratic governance. Regional powers might intervene directly. Economic collapse could follow political instability. The protesters' original demands, ending corruption and nepotism, remain unaddressed. New leaders will emerge, but will they be better than the old ones? History suggests they'll simply serve different masters. Meanwhile, the pattern continues spreading. Indonesia has seen similar stirrings. Pakistan faces ongoing political instability. And yes, voices are calling for Indian youth to follow Nepal's example. This is the real danger of manufactured revolutions. They create a contagion effect, where young people across the region believe violence is the only path to change. They don't realize they're being used as pawns in a larger game. The antidote to this manipulation isn't defending corrupt governments. It's recognizing the difference between genuine reform movements and orchestrated regime change operations. Real democratic change comes through institutions, elections, civil society, and gradual reform. It's slower and less dramatic than burning parliament buildings, but it actually works. Violent upheavals that topple governments overnight rarely create lasting positive change. They typically lead to more authoritarianism, not less. Nepal's Gen Z deserves better than being manipulated into destroying their own country's democratic institutions. They deserve leaders who address their real concerns about corruption and unemployment through genuine reform, not through foreign-sponsored chaos. The question facing every democracy in the region is simple. Will they learn from Nepal's experience, or will they repeat it? The pattern is now visible to anyone willing to see it. The playbook has been exposed. The next move is up to the youth of South Asia. Will they allow themselves to be used as weapons in someone else's war? Or will they demand real change through democratic means? The choice they make will determine not just their own futures, but the future of democracy across one of the world's most important regions. Nepal's story isn't over. but its lessons are already clear for anyone wise enough to learn from them.